No, it's just on its own. Good afternoon, everybody. I just finished my last test run in the Adizero PrimeX Strung with the 50 millimeters of stack height. That's right, 50 millimeters. Just finished my last run, 3 miles, about 9:17 per mile today. Stats up on the screen really quickly, but otherwise, let's dive right into talking about this shoe, a little bit about the specs, but ultimately how I'm going to use it. Do I like it? Do I see myself going forward with this shoe much in the future? I'm reviewing this as someone who's around 240 pounds, dedicated runner, but ultimately, is this the right shoe for me? And could it be the right shoe for you? So let's talk a little bit about the specs of this shoe first, and let's start off with the stack height. It's 49.5 millimeters of stack height in the heel, so just about that 50 millimeter stack height, and 41 millimeters in the forefoot, giving you an 8.5 millimeter drop. Now, just for some comparison, something like the Nike Zoom X Alpha Fly has under 40 millimeters of stack height in the heel to meet the World Athletic Standard to be able to use for a marathon and win a marathon. You could not do that in the PrimeX Strung. It is above that legal limit, but again, for perspective, about the same height, close to 40 millimeters in the heel of the Alpha Fly and in the forefoot of the Adidas PrimeX Strung, and again, all the way up to 50 millimeters in the heel. That stack height comes from 3 layers of Light Strike Pro foam, a foam that I really was not familiar with. I hadn't run in the Adidas shoes before, not the Adios Pro, not the original PrimeX, so this was my first time using Light Strike, and I'd always kind of pictured Adidas as having a more firm foam. Now, especially with the double layers of carbon fiber plates, which we'll talk about in just a second in this shoe, I really wasn't too optimistic that it was going to be soft enough for me, that it was going to be the ride that I like. I'm a Zoom X foam, maybe New Balance foam type of guy. Just like it a little bit softer, a little bit more that spring and bounce back rather than a firm ride. And this ride is firm, but I have to say this shoe has completely changed my mind. And honestly, this is one of my favorite shoes from 2022. The foam is firmer, but you still get a nice enough sink into that foam, although it's not as much of a sink, to feel like you get a lot more energy return out of the foam, but it's still very protective of your body and your foot from striking that hard pavement. So I really do like the balance of this Light Strike Pro foam, and I have to say I'm definitely going to be looking at Light Strike Pro in the other shoes that come out in the future. They're already talking about a PrimeX Strung 2. There's going to be new versions of the Adios Pro, I'm sure, for marathon racing, and this is definitely something that's now on my radar. Now, I did mention there's 2 carbon fiber elements. One is the carbon energy rods that you can see peeking out through one layer of the Light Strike Pro foam. You can also see it on the side right here, so you get a sense of what plane those energy rods are inserted into the midsole. Now, the second thing you have is what looks like more of a nylon plate, and you can see the purple right through the holes here. That's actually a second plastic or nylon plate that's in your forefoot to give you another sense of energy return and just rigidity in this tall shoe. And you really do feel that energy propelling you forward. You know, whether it's the Light Strike Pro, the energy rods, or that extra nylon plate, I don't know, but the combination of all 3 really does give you a very energetic and again, still cushioned ride, something that I was not expecting. As you move up to the upper, you can see this very unique strung upper. It's basically a bunch of little threads, all sort of like plastered together. It's very minimal. It's actually mostly an upper comprised of only that strung material. You can kind of see through it in some angles when you look inside the shoe. Again, you can see very breathable, very lightweight, and there's really only material up around the heel collar and the tongue to just give you some softness and cushioning and pad you from that strung upper. But overall, again, that upper is very nice, and these lace holes are very reminiscent. Again, I'll go back to Nike of the ZoomX Streak Fly. I love the way those laces fit in the ZoomX Streak Fly, and they're pretty much the same here, where there's like a thread that makes these little lace hole loops, and it just, in my opinion, helps not create a sense of the shoe being too tight, even though you can pull the laces nice and firm and get that really snug fit. The laces themselves, really basic, sort of a cotton lace, no plus or minus about that. The tongue is just enough, and the heel counter and heel collar has this funny little tab that pops up, but ultimately it's just going to sit folded over most of the time. Now, I will throw out one complaint right away, just that this part of the strung upper is a little bit firm. It's malleable when you come at it from the side, but again, just a little bit firm and hard when you tap it this way. So if you're wearing shorter socks, this does tend to dig into my Achilles and just the skin just a little bit, which would give me some rubbing. But again, longer socks really have complemented the shoe really well, and it's really mitigated that issue completely. So just be aware, you know, longer socks are kind of a must in this shoe, but once you do that, the issue kind of goes away. Now you might be asking, what's the weight of this huge tall shoe? It's actually not that bad. It's about 255 grams for a US men's 9.5 or a UK 8.5. So that's a pretty light shoe, especially, you know, again, for this size of midsole. It really feels very lightweight and nimble on foot. Now, it does feel a little bit awkward at first. It's tall. It's certainly taller than anything else out there. I don't think there's another running shoe currently that's over 50 millimeters of stack height in the heel. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but keep in mind the Nike 4%, those Vaporflies, when they first came out, they felt very awkward to people on foot. And as soon as people started running in them, they became one of the most popular shoes at every major marathon for years and years. So I think there is some getting used to here. I don't think it's a negative. You know, I'm never off balance. I did some very like extreme tests where I was just walking on very angled surfaces and angled grass, and I really never felt like I was going to fall over, but I do have relatively strong, you know, muscles or a good sense of balance myself. So you might just need to be honest with you as a person and think, you know, am I a little bit clumsy? Is my balance not so great? And if that's the case, you might want to avoid the shoe because it does give you a little bit of an unstable feeling being as tall as it is. Something like the Asics Super Blast is a little bit more stable, less of a speed shoe in my opinion. That's really just like a daily trainer in my opinion with a lot of foam. But just keep in mind there are more stable super height shoes out there if we're going to go, you know, in that maximalist direction. The Continental rubber outsole is tried and true for Adidas. There are a few rubber patches on the side of the heel just to give you that extra durability, and I never fear any kind of wear and tear on the Continental outsole of an Adidas shoe ever. Just tried and true grip in wet weather, cold weather, and really just lasts at least as long as the midsole foam does, so you never really have any issues there. So with the specs out of the way, I've already hinted that this is really one of my favorite shoes to come out this year. I think it's innovative, I think it's different, and ultimately I think it really does serve a great purpose in my rotation of shoes that I would look to use going forward. For me, this is a shoe that I could see myself using very regularly for my longer runs, or even more specifically my longer runs where I have some marathon paced effort or threshold paced effort mixed in. For the New York City Half Marathon coming up, I've started to build up my training block a little bit. And I have a few weekends where my long runs are going to be just that. They're going to focus on some speed work mixed in with a lot of mileage. This is a shoe I would go for 100% in those scenarios. Longer runs with marathon pace or threshold efforts mixed in, you know, 2 miles easy, 2 miles threshold, 2 miles easy, 2 mile marathon pace, something like that, just kind of off the top of my head, where you're going in and out of those quicker paces. This shoe is fine for an easier run. It does make you want to go quicker, and it's really going to shine when you do try and pick up those paces for extended mileage. Now, some people think, you know, are these carbon plated shoes necessary? Are they good for you? Are they going to hurt your foot in any way? Are they taking away from the effort of the workout if it's doing a lot of the work for you? And, you know, I think the jury's still out on that. Ultimately, you look at some of the big athletes out there, whether it's someone like Kipchoge who's training for the marathon, Who does occasionally use the carbon fiber plated shoes for workouts, long runs, that kind of thing. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who's a great 5K runner, has even spoken out about the carbon plated shoes and said something along the lines of if they're going to help him recover to go max effort sooner, day after day after day, it's something that he's definitely going to use in his rotation, and obviously the results speak for themselves when he's out on the track. So there is some evidence out there that these elite athletes are still benefiting from these shoes, even if they're doing some of the work for them. I think really it just leads to better recovery, shorter recovery times, less wear and tear on the body, and even for us more hobby runners, people who have a lot of passion for the sport but really are never going to be operating at an elite level, I think it still helps with us just protecting our body, reducing some of that wear and tear again as we go up in mileage and do the day-to-day. I think these shoes do still achieve that goal. I really don't have any complaints about anything structurally, performance-wise. My biggest complaint or barrier to entry for the shoe really is going to be the price. $300 may very well be just too much for this type of shoe for most consumers and runners out there. So again, I just think that's going to deter people from trying this shoe. Ultimately, it's going to be the biggest fault for Adidas here. But overall, I love it. That's really all I have to say. So I appreciate everybody watching. Let us know down below if you've tried this shoe. How do you like it? How do you like Lightstrike Pro in general? Is it a foam that you're really fond of? Definitely curious to hear some of those opinions. So let me know. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care.